All right, as of right this moment, it's now 9 o'clock. You guys ready? Yeah. Well, since I'm one of the conference organizers, I want to ask, how are you guys liking the conference so far? Good. Well, I'm glad. That's high praise because we work really hard to try and make a great conference for you. Well, today I get to talk to you just a little bit about a security methodology. And so that's a fun topic, right? This is going to be one of those remedial topics for some of you. For some of you, this is going to be like, what is that? How many of you are in this room wondering or barely understanding what a security methodology might be? Okay, so a few of you, that's great. Anyways, let's get into this. I want to talk, hold on, I probably need to click my button. I want to just talk a little bit about me. There's a lot of you that probably don't know a whole lot about me and my story and a couple of other things. My name is Troy Jessup. I live up in Salt Lake City. I've been up there for about 23 years or so. I grew up in a really small town in southern Utah called Gunlock. Anybody know where Gunlock is? Well, that's cool. All right, so it's not that small, I guess. But it's one of those towns where you grow up and everybody's family. Like your aunt lives down the street and your uncle lives up the street and all those crazy things. Different aunt, different uncle, just to be clear on that, right? And so I work at the Utah Education and Telehealth Network as my 9-to-5 day job. It's a great organization. We're the organization that's responsible for providing internet into anything that's state government or education within the state of Utah. Now, it's a broad stroke, but I won't get into the details of it. But it's a great place to work. We are hiring people. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and say we're hiring a security engineer right now. We're hiring a network operations center manager right now. We're hiring network technicians right now in our operations center. So if you have interest in something like that, come find me. I'll give you the link to go check out what the job description's all about in case you're interested in something like that. But I have to give a plug to the fact that I work there. I've been there my 20th year of being at the Utah Education Network passed last August. So I'm an old timer now. And normally in the technology career or in the technology industry, when you're in a security career, you bounce all over the place. How many of you guys are in the security world and you bounce from place to place to place? It's been my pleasure over the years to be involved with such a really cool organization like the Utah Education Network and interact with many of you. I mean, there's a lot of familiar faces in this audience here that we've interacted with for years and years to help promote security and network and other things like that. A couple of other things. I'm also Jupiter. So if you hear the handle Jupiter, that's probably me that they're referring to. There are two Jupiters out there. There's DD Tech Jupiter, and there's Saint Jupiter. Now, I'm the Saint Jupiter. I'm also the DD Tech Jupiter. Now, I want to tell you just a little bit about what that means. DD Tech is a company that was made up when we tried to pull off the troll of all time at the DEF CON conference. How many of you guys are familiar with DEF CON and how that works and stuff? At DEF CON, they run this gigantic capture the flag competition. And a number of years ago, the old crew that used to make the game and make it all work decided they were going to retire. So Dark Tangent, the guy who runs DEF CON, approached us as a team because we're the team that won the Capture the Flag competition over and over and over again. They approached us and they wanted us to provide the game to other people. And so we created DD Tech. This is going to be a long story. I'm going to compress down really short here. We created this DD Tech organization, and we went to DEF CON that year as DD Tech, and it was me, it was a couple of other people from UEN and others that we went down there, and we put up this big stage, which is normally in the middle of the CTF arena. If you've ever been to DEF CON, you've seen that, and we had all these lights and all this fun projection and things, but the School of Root team, which is the one that became DD Tech, was actually pretending to play the game like everybody else. They had a seat out in the audience and stuff. And anyways, so it was basically me standing at this booth or standing at this big stage running this game while all of the rest of the people that were supposed to be running it are pretending to play the game or whatever. It's maybe a bad story. You're not laughing, so let's move on. That's a laugh, right? Okay, couple of other things. I am the founder of the Utah Saint organization and SAINTCON. I don't say that to be boast or braggadocious or anything else. It's just the way that it was, that we decided a long time ago to form a group of people. It came out of the education space for the most part. So there's a lot of you. How many of you have been Utah Saint members since like the dawn of time, right? There's a few of you in here. I can totally recognize your faces. And so we decided to make this group, and it kind of became this organic thing, and it grew, and then we said, oh, well, we'll start doing a conference. And the conference ended up being in a room up at the Eccles Broadcast Center in Salt Lake City. That was 16 years ago now, where we all got together, and Troy sat there for 2 days straight and just gave everybody like, hey, here's all this cool information, and people's eyes are coming out of their heads, and jaws are dropping on the floor, because back then, 16 years ago, just 16 years ago, I mean, that seems like a long time now, but just 16 years ago, there wasn't anything for security. There was nothing that we were doing, right? So we've come a long way in just that short period of time. Then the conference evolved from something called the Security Summit, which is what we called it back then, into the Utah Saint Conference, and then we rebranded it SAINTCON and things. Anyways, there's where we are today. I'm also a DEF CON goon, and so I participate in DEF CON. I help run productions down there. So if you ever go to DEF CON, you probably see me running around the halls really fast, trying to running around trying to fix problems and issues and things. I am one of the groups that has had the privilege of running the CTF competition down there, which was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. I am, and this is true, I cope with social anxiety. I'm somebody that I'm approachable and everything else, but I'll tell you what, it scares me to death to talk to you guys. It's kind of interesting, it's weird, whatever. And so if I don't interact really well, it's because I'm a social anxiety brain person. How's that? So it's kind of weird that somebody like that would start an organization and build this conference and stand up in front of a bunch of people all the time and teach for hours on security, but it's because I love it. My love is seeing people in that moment where they go, whoa, I understand. Like when I go down to Lockpick Village and you've got somebody that's picked their first lock in their entire life. How many picked their first lock while you're at SAINTCON this year? Okay? That moment, for me, it's like, oh, man, they got it. And it's not that, hey, you picked a lock. That's cool, but did you learn, like, hey, everything has a vulnerability. Something as simple as a lock that we seem to go down and say, hey, you know what? Here's this $2 lock from Walmart that we're going to go stick on a door that's protecting $300,000 worth of equipment, and we somehow expect there to be more than $2 in value of security there, right? So the aha moments that come along with those kinds of things. And so that's why I do it. So that's why I put away my social anxiety and all those demons, as it were, and I sit up here. Anyways, let's talk about what we're here to talk about today. So using a security methodology. How many of you guys feel like when you're at your office, when it pertains to security, that this is how it is? You're just kind of feeling around in the dark. You're kind of blindfolded. You know, we don't know what's going on. Like, we know we got to patch that computer over there, and we know that thing's got a vulnerability over there, and that thing just got hacked yesterday, and things sound familiar? Okay. That's a perfect sign of an organization that has no security methodology or a poorly implemented security methodology. So let's talk about a few. Some of these might be a little bit familiar. COBIT. How many of you guys have heard of COBIT? Okay, some of you. I won't make you raise your hands on all these things. I ask a lot of questions to the audience for a little bit of interaction. ISO 27001 and all of its derivations and pieces. COBIT's on there twice for some reason, because I probably because I made this slide at like 3 o'clock this morning. And so, pardon me if there's typos and other things in there. NIST, the SP800 series for NIST and such. But really, what a security methodology is a documented process. So how many of you guys have gone out and documented your own process for implementing and managing cybersecurity? Okay? Was it based off of anything, or did you guys just come up and say, hey, we're going to come up with this new standard? Anyone? That raised their hand? Go ahead. Okay. So you built it off of something. Anybody just build something from scratch and said, this is how we're going to do it? Well, that's sort of good. I mean, that's a lot of work, right? But it's a documented process. So it's good to have one. Defines processes and procedures. So there's a lot of different processes and procedures that you have to have in place in order to be effective with security. And we're going to talk about a few of them. Implementation of security. How do you implement it, right? It talks about how you go about the processes, or what processes, how to implement it, and then ongoing management of security. All those things make up a security methodology and a framework, okay? And it becomes your security blueprint, as it were. So let's just talk a little bit about COBIT. How many of you implemented COBIT as your security methodology? Okay, no hands that I can see. That's good, because COBIT's not really good for probably most of you in this room. Okay, COBIT was built back in the 90s by ISACA, and it's generally used in government settings, but like federal government settings. It was updated. There's a current revision, COBIT 5, so it's still relevant. There's a lot of businesses out there and things that use it, but it's complicated. But I put in there, but not terrible. I mean, any security methodology is going to be complicated. Every framework is going to be complicated when you're dealing with something as big as security. And so it's out there. It's a decent one if you want to go and refer to it. ISO 27001. How many of you guys use that one as your security methodology? So at least one hand in the room. Okay. So ISO 27001 also, or this one was built by the International Standards Organization, which is a very well-respected organization. But the problems that I see with this one is it's very broad. I mean, it makes it, it's a framework that can be applied to any type of organization under any circumstances, because it's a mile wide. And it's a mile deep, too. It's one of those that, man, you can really lose yourself in ISO 27001. And I'm not saying these things to discourage you from using those or tell you that what you've done is wrong in implementing these things. NIST, SP800, one of my other favorites. This is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, so federal organization, federally funded. It's a very current standard. How many of you are using NIST? Okay, a lot more hands are going to go up. That's expected. Okay, NIST is also a very comprehensive security framework. Okay, it's easy to cross-map to other standards. They've actually built some of those into there. Like you go in and it's like reading at the bottom of the Bible. Those of you that are religious to some degree, you'll go down and there's always the footnotes that say, go see this other scripture over here. I didn't mean to bring religion into this, but you know what I'm saying? In NIST, there's all those references. It references COBIT, it references ISO 27001, and so on and so forth. But it focuses a lot on planning and organization. And I feel like, yeah, it most certainly addresses how to manage security, excuse me, and do some of those things, but it's focused on planning and organization. So how do you choose? How many of you guys struggled with the choice of framework? Okay, a few hands. The rest of it was easy, right? How many of you don't have a framework again? Let me just raise a hand. I really want to see. If you don't have a framework implemented, raise them high, loud and proud. Okay, so a few of you. Okay. So for the rest of you, how did you choose your framework? Was it just, it was there when you got there? How many are in that situation? Okay, it's there when you got there and such. Well, it's complicated, right? Based off of the type of organization that you are, based off of different compliance requirements, the type of industry, the implementation difficulties, resource requirements. I mean, how many of you guys have implemented SP800 from top to bottom with 5 security engineers? It's never going to happen, right? Well, so the interesting thing is many of you, or some of you, have nothing in place, or something that doesn't work. How many of you guys have a security framework? And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand on this one, but think about it. A security framework that you have that's the standard, but it's poorly implemented. And so what I might volunteer here is that something that does not work equals nothing. So that the double equal in programming speak is equal to, right? Just kidding. Okay, so let me tell you about nothing for just a minute. As I mentioned, I grew up in a little town called Gunlock. This is a ranching community. We grew up in the farm. You know, this is the type of community where in the morning, at about 5 in the morning, my grandfather would come down in this old busted up Ford pickup truck, drive down the little lane to our house, and he'd sit outside our door and he would honk the horn over and over and over until we woke up, got out of bed, and came down, and with our eyes kind of still fresh from sleep, we'd get in the truck and he'd haul us off to the ranch for a hard day's work every day for the entire summer. And so the interesting thing, there's a couple of interesting things that I learned. My grandpa didn't do a lick of work, ever. It was always about having his grandkids and kids and other things do all of this work. He organized it really well, and he did things. And I wanted to share with you a little story about it. So there's one time, how many of you guys grew up in a farming community? Okay, good. So I'm at least speaking to some of you, you'll understand. We're in this gigantic hayfield. I know that's a wheat field. That's not my grandpa in the picture. But we're in this big hayfield, and we're changing hand line. Okay, so we're going down, we're picking up the lines, we're moving them to the next spot, and we're hooking them back up and stuff. Those are sprinklers, by the way, hand line sprinklers. They're light enough to where, you know, a 12-year-old kid can kind of teeter them down. And my grandpa would always sit on the edge of the field. I mean, he was there. He was our chauffeur. He got us to the field, and we would work and move all these hand lines. It'd take us hours because they're huge fields. And he would just sit on the edge of this field leaning on a shovel. Okay, so you can imagine that in your mind's eye. You've probably seen somebody like, you know, they're just leaning on the shovel, foot kind of crossed, and they're just watching and supervising, as he called it. And so there was one day that I was feeling a little bit abused from the work perspective. And so I go over and I stand by him. And I'm like, and he's like, well, what are you doing? I'm just supervising. You know, and he says, okay, that's fine, as long as you're doing something. And so a few minutes pass, you know, my brother's out there moving hand line, a couple of my cousins and other things like that. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. And he says, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. If you're going to be here, I want you to stand here and jump up and down. Just jump up and down. Do something. Don't just stand there, is what he said. He said, don't just stand there. Do something. Okay? So, as I relate that story, it's going to come into play in a couple of other slides here. In the opening keynote, I'm sure that this isn't attributed to Lost, but you've probably heard this quote before. How many of you heard this? There are two types of organizations, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. Okay, we've heard this before. It's kind of one of those urban legend kind of things in the security realm. Okay, how do you know if you were that guy? How do you know? I'm going to wait for an answer. How do you know? Yep, absolutely. You're hoping that some of these security tools and pieces and things that you've implemented might tell you about it. Are they comprehensive? Generally not, right? There's always holes in our security. There's always holes in what we're doing. Okay, so let's bring this back to the framework for just a second and talking about choosing a framework. And I'm going to make my recommendation for a framework. You ready? I'm going to recommend, okay, it's a big decision. Don't rush me. I'm going to recommend that you don't just stand there and that you do something. And until you choose, because again, I'm going to actually go back to this slide right here. There are a lot of things that you need to worry about in choosing a framework, and I'm not going to recommend one for you. And I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say, until you do have the time to go through that process and choose one, I want you to don't just stand there, and I want you to start doing something. So we're going to talk about how to do that, and then I am going to make a recommendation for a framework. Okay? Start somewhere or restart somewhere if you're in a non-effective security framework thing. Okay? Someone that solves most of their security issues with, something that solves most of the security issues with the least number of steps. Okay? I believe in doing things as simple as possible. In fact, James Pope, who was here, he's the one that taught me. I recently hired him. He's also the security engineer that's leaving. I can out him. He's going on to bigger and better things, but I hired him, he taught me something interesting. It's something I've always known, but it's something that clicked in my mind. I had that aha moment that I was talking about earlier. And he says, listen, you don't have to do everything perfect all the time. You just have to do something. You just have to start somewhere. And once you start somewhere, it's going to lead to this thing, and then it's going to lead to the next thing. And so we're going to talk about a couple of things that will help if you don't have a framework or if you're looking to implement a framework. Okay, I believe in just 5 things, but there's 20 of them. Okay, what you're seeing right here is a slide that's probably going to be really hard, especially for those of you in the back, to read. This is the outline of the Center for Internet Security Critical Controls. How many of you are familiar with this methodology? Okay, how many of you are using this methodology? Okay, and then hold your hands up if you're using it, and then put your hands down if you're not in education. Okay, well that means we've done a good job because we've pushed this security framework very hard in the education space, and there's a couple reasons why. Okay, first of all, it only covers 20 aspects of security. Now, when you're in the education space, which is, again, where I do a lot of my work and consulting and help for people, doing all 50,000 things in ISO 27001 or in NIST SP 800 and things becomes this large elephant to eat. And so what we've done is we figured it's easier to just say, hey, start with these things, these 20 things, okay? And then we narrowed it down and said, start doing 5 of the 20 things. Okay, so if you go out to the Center for Internet Security, in fact, Google it, you can do that, Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls, you'll find that on their own website, they say, if you just start with the top 5 things, you're going to make a huge difference in your organization. It's going to solve, I'm not going to throw out some arbitrary number, but maybe I will, 80% of your problems. It may be 70, it may be 60, it may be 90% of your problems. But it's going to take you from 0 or a not effective 20% to that 80% quite quickly. And so we're going to cover a bunch of these things. Let's cover control number 1, just for an example. Okay? And so control number 1 is inventory of authorized hardware. Okay? I'm paraphrasing it a little bit. That's not exactly the full name of control number 1. But this talks about actively managing, tracking, and correcting your inventory for all hardware devices on your network so that only authorized devices are given access and unauthorized and unmanaged devices are found and prevented from gaining access or are put into a sandbox somewhere so that they can play somewhere else. Those kinds of things. I mean, it expands out beyond what I'm showing here, but if you just do that on your network, you're going to be a whole lot more effective. Okay? There's going to be a whole lot more security because now what this essentially is let me boil it down to a couple of components. First of all, you want to separate your networks. Now, you want to have your secure networks and your less secure networks and your even less secure networks all separate from each other. And the interesting thing is we started talking about that years ago in the education space and with SAINTCON attendees and things, and I think that generally security has figured it out, right? How many of you don't have a segmented network? It's a big flat network, all your servers and workstations and everything else. You're too scared to admit it if you are anyway, that's fine, okay? But those still exist. I mean, I've been out to pen tests where we find large flat networks with everything, like all of the sacred things on a network, on the exact same network as the computers and desktops for the employees in the organization, and even computers and desktops connected to their wireless public, their public Wi-Fi implementations and things. So it's kind of crazy. So separating your networks, okay? Also, understanding what's on your network. Control number 1 is all about knowing what is on your network. What is there for you to secure? If you don't know, I mean, if you can think in your mind right now, do I even know everything that is on my network? And if the answer is no, then you've got a little bit of a problem. That might be a big problem, okay? And it's all about understanding. You can't secure something that you don't know is there. Okay, and so I'm not saying that you need to go out and you need to implement all these really crazy things to prevent that device and prevent that device from getting on the network. But again, we're going to start slow. There's certain things inside of this control that you can implement really quickly and easily. Get started. do something. Don't just stand there, as we were talking about, right? And so understanding what those are, and you want to start preventing unmanaged devices from having access, or put them in a part of your network that doesn't have access to other parts of the network, and so on and so forth. Make sense? Okay. Let's go to control number 2 in the Center for Internet Security Critical Controls. Control number 2 is inventory of authorized software. Again, the control's name's a little bit longer than that, but this gives you the gist. This is where you actively manage, inventory, track, and correct all software on the network so that only authorized software is installed and can be executed, and that unauthorized and unmanaged software is found and prevented from installation or execution. How many of you guys have achieved this holy grail of security? Right? That's a tough one. How many of you guys have somebody that wants local admin on their machine so they can install whatever the heck they want, and you're going to get it out of their cold, dead fingers, right? You're going to pull that back. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's talk about software, okay? Software is what makes things blow up, right? I mean, hardware by its own individual nature isn't necessarily the source of compromises within our network. It's important to know that hardware is out there, but it's the software that causes problems. How many of you dealt with ransomware issues in your networks? Or just malware in general? How many of you guys have to go clean that same, I'll call it out like this, I don't mean to be mean to anybody, but you have to go down the hall and clean the clickbait malware off of the secretary's computer over and over again, right? Some of you, it's okay, you don't have to raise them very high, right? But we have those issues, right? It's like, even though you tell them, just don't click the yes button, just don't click it. When it pops up and says, install Adobe Flash, just don't do that. And things, you tell them over and over and over again. Well, so all of those things create vulnerability, and control number 2 is here to address that. So there are different ways, okay? So I'm just doing the whole highlight and overview at this point, and I want you to kind of dig into this a little bit more here in a little bit. But, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. But ultimately, software and controlling it is a key component. Let's move on, and then I'll come back to that, because there's a couple of other points that I know I'll remember here. Control number 3, okay? Establish, implement, and actively manage, track, report, and correct the security configuration of laptops, servers, workstations, using a rigorous configuration management and change control process in order to prevent hackers from exploiting vulnerable services and settings. By the way, these are all the little snippet paragraphs right off of their website, so that's why it sounds so formal when I speak so informally. But that's what control number 3 is. Secure configurations. I want you to type in to your browser that URL. Believe me, you can trust me that it's okay. I'm not sending you to a malware site. I put it in OCR things so you can see the capitals and other things, because it's one of those bit.ly links that the URL shorteners so that it's easy for you to type. But I'm going to have your computer do something on your behalf real quick. So do it. It's safe. Or don't. I mean, you can not believe me, and that's fine. But we're going to talk just briefly about hardening guides and secure configurations and what the importance of those are. Okay, how many of you just went to Google and it typed a couple things in for you and then went and searched it for you? Okay, it's a cute way for me to say that's how simple it is to start your jumping up and down and do something. Okay, hardening guides. How many of you guys have comprehensive hardening guides as part of your general implementation of security? Okay, that's scary. Okay, there's a few hands. That's scary, because this right here, it might be control number 3 in a list of prioritized controls, but not having a secure configuration is one of the leading causes of problems inside of an organization, and the proliferation and spreading of malware and having issues and things, okay? So what I'd had you do if you followed that link is it goes out to Google and types in something like hardening guides. I don't remember exactly the word I put in there, but hardening guides. There are thousands of different recommendations, and it used to be that there were only like 3 or 4 really good ones, and now there's hundreds of really good hardening guides, and there's hardening guides for all different types of operating systems on all different types of platforms. So what's a hardening guide? Somebody want to be on the spot real quick? What's a hardening guide? Go ahead. Okay. okay? It's the recommendations for the configuration of a certain system that provides what? Provides security. It's ultimately called the turn off the things you don't need thing. Here, you get one of these for answering that question. Yeah, how many of you guys go out and disable all of the services on a computer that aren't supposed to be turned on, especially on your servers and your critical systems? Okay, so I'll pause here for just a second and take you down story lane for a minute and say, I've been involved in hundreds of pen tests. Well, maybe not hundreds, but a lot of pen tests over the years. And so often we find servers and systems that aren't just locked down to the application that they're providing. So if it's a web application, for example, it's not just port 443 open, but we start seeing all sorts of things open on these. We start seeing NetBIOS ports open, we see FTP ports open, and we see all these different things because some of these are turned on by default, some of them are installed as kind of an easy way to do different things, and it gives us all sorts of access into these systems while we're doing pen testing. Going through and implementing a secure configuration on these systems and servers is one of the easiest and best ways to increase the security within your network. I mean, that's kind of cliche talk, but it is. Okay, let's talk about control number 4 for a minute, and we're going to kind of review some of these here in just a minute. Okay, control number 4 is vulnerability scanning and remediation. How many of you guys, put you on the spot, don't do regular vulnerability scans on your network? Okay, a few of you, loud and proud, right? Okay, it's a little bit scary if you're not, right? Because there are so many different things these days that can get picked up in a vulnerability scan that you can know what's going on your network and go out and remediate those things. Hopefully all the rest of you would have been a big, loud, and proud yes, but that's one of the key principles or key controls for the Center for Internet Security Controls is continually acquire, access, and take action on new information in order to identify vulnerabilities, remediate, and minimize the window of opportunity for hackers. How often should you guys be scanning? Any recommendations from anybody? Constantly. What's that? All the time. Okay, so I think, Matt, I mean, if you would have asked me 3 years ago, I would have said, yeah, monthly, maybe bi-week, semi-weekly, sorry. And then it kind of got to weekly, and then you're like, oh man, how often is a new vulnerability for a system coming out these days? How many times have you had to patch Flash just since January? Do you want to know how many times they've released a patch for Flash since January? Anybody from Adobe in here? I'm about to out you. Okay, there's been no fewer than 86 different patches to Adobe Flash since January. How many of you guys have patched Adobe Flash 86 times since January? How many of you guys are going, oh crap, I've got a bunch of Adobe Flash on my network, right? Go ahead. I saw that this morning. It actually wasn't with Adobe Flash. The real quick version of that is Equifax did get pwned again. These are the hackers on a crusade thing. And what they did is they put up as a malware piece, and you've probably seen something like this before, you click on a link on their webpage, you get redirected, and it pops up the little, you need to install Adobe Flash message that then installs malware if you click on it. And so they pwned the website and put the fake Adobe Flash thing. But yes, right? There's constantly problems. There's constantly vulnerabilities. And they're being found at a rate that is out of control now. There is no way that you can keep up with all of them. And so instead of having to learn and going out and research and listen to like the Utah Saints security briefings and know all the different new vulnerabilities for the past weeks and things, what you can do, and it's somewhat easier, does take time, is you can just scan your networks with an up-to-date vulnerability scanner, and it's going to tell you, here are the things that I see, and here are the things that you need to go fix. Now, there's a big difference, and I understand the big difference. James Pope, who, if he was in here, I'd give him a little bit of a hard time because he's leaving us still. But he's been our go-getter as it pertains to finding vulnerabilities and going and getting the people to remediate them. It's been one of the hardest things in our organization because you know what? We've got coders that are building all these different web applications, and the last thing they want to do is stop coding and go over and fix some busted piece of code from 3 years ago, right? How many of you are in that position? It happens all the time, okay? But we're constantly working on the remediation part. Vulnerability scanning without remediation is not effective. Okay, let's move on real quick. Control number 5, okay? This is control administrative privileges or access, okay? This is the process and tools used to track, control, prevent, correct the use, assignment, and configuration of administrative privileges on computers, networks, and applications. This is one of the other holy grails of security, okay? How many of you guys do not, or I asked this question before, but I want you to keep your hands raised for just a second. How many of you guys have or don't have control over administrative privileges in your organization, meaning that people have access as admin on their workstations? Okay? It's becoming very scary. So let me tell you why. I mean, you probably know why. You're all smart security folks. But the issue is now that with administrative privileges, malware and other things get installed very easily on a computer. When you take those things away, you lose the ability to install those things, but you piss off, I'm going to use the word, sorry, you frustrate, we'll tone it down. I'm not mad up here, I promise, not mad. But you frustrate your users, right? And how many of you guys, that's the reason why, right? Is that the reason why you're not removing administrative privileges? Your users just get the pitchforks, now we're out there hunting down IT professionals like you're dead, you know, like this is not going to happen. Let me give you a tip. We found a way to make it easier, okay? So this little tip you're about to get is going to be worth the entire time you've been in this room, okay? In fact, what I want you to do is I want you to get your hands and I want you to hold them together like this. All of you, just go ahead. This is called the PreApplause Position, okay? And so if you think that by the time I end up explaining this next little piece, if you think it was worth your time and effort and energy to be in this room and listen to this crazy dude up in front of you, I want you to applause. If not, you can just kind of go back to the post-applause position without actually doing the applause, okay? Here is what we've done that's been effective. We've gone out and we've started user training. I know, hold on. It's okay. Don't put your hands down yet. It's user training. I know it sounds hard, but it's not. If you go out and you explain one finite concept, the reason why people want administrative access on their computers is so they're not inconvenienced by, I can't install this thing, I can't install that thing. Now, there isn't a magic bullet solution to it, but what you can do is you can tell them, listen, we're not taking away administrative privileges from you because you suck at IT, because you're awesome. We're taking away administrative privileges because of what the computer can do on your behalf. Okay, this is a James Pope thing too. Okay, we're taking away your computer privileges because, or your administrative privileges, because it's that evil internet that's going to install something and has administrative privileges and will take over your computer. Okay, and guess what? Just that change in conversation that we've had with our users, people are like, hey, take it. Yeah, you know, I don't want the responsibility of that bad internet thing installing stuff on my computer. And so if you take the mindset of, hey, you know what, I have to have administrative privileges for my thing, and you help them understand that with that, those privileges come the liability of you being the one that is installing malware into the system, then they seem to relinquish that a little bit. So if it deserved a little bit of applause. But let me just say, I mean, it's effective. We've been very effective. We've gone out to different school districts throughout the state. We've met with certain state agencies and things that struggle with the administrative privileges thing, and we've been able to teach their users, like, hey, this is what your computer can do in your behalf when you have administrative privileges, and they're just like, hey, you know what? I don't want that responsibility. You know what? I will call IT when I need to install Adobe Flash and other things, okay? So we're still in the do something stuff. Let's talk about the rest, or not, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of the Center for Internet Security critical controls. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here and say 6 through 20 are all great things, okay? There's a lot of good stuff in here. Let's review a few of them, right? Maintenance monitoring and analysis of audit logs, like so when things are happening on your network, you're going to want to be able to know what's going on. Email and web browser protections, making sure that people can't install that really weird toolbar that then tracks every single movement for them and then installs all these other adware crap. Malware defenses, making sure that there's appropriate antivirus stuff. It's kind of interesting that we have to get down to number 8 before we even start talking about antivirus, okay? Limitation and control of network ports, okay? That's one of those holy grail things as well, like, can you plug into this port? Well, he can, but you can't because MAC address things, 802, never mind. We're not going to cover it all. Data recovery capability, making sure you have your backup, secure configuration of network devices. That's important. Secure configuration of laptops and workstations and servers is more important. Boundary defense, so how you set up your firewall and what you're protecting. Data protection, making sure that you're not losing data, it's not being exfiltrated. And then, so the farther we get down the list, those of you that aren't familiar with this framework, the more complicated and the more finite the controls become, and the more hard they are to do and implement. Okay, so as we get down there, I mean, the last few things, let's just skip down to 19, incident response management. Like, if you're to the point in the Center for Internet Security Controls implementation that you're building this beautiful incident response management plan and things, you're doing good, right? That means you've got 1 through 18 dialed in. I guess what I'm trying to say is go and start at the top and just do one thing at a time and make progress on it. And what I can say is there's going to be a certain point where the one dude that you are, for some of you in your organization that's implementing security, is going to be overwhelmed by the resource required to get there. But I promise it'll be after control number 5. And so if you can just get through the top 5 controls, you're going to increase the effectiveness of security within your organization. And the farther you can get down that list with the resources and the time and energy and all the other stuff that you've got, the better you're going to be. But you shouldn't be doing pen tests and red team exercises on your network until you've got the other things dialed in. And so the top 5 things are a little bit hard to work on. I mean, you're talking about redefining network ports. You're talking about assigning zones and things like that within your network. These are hard things to some degree or another, but they can be made as easy as possible. You don't have to, I mean, part of the time, we get together as security geeks and we talk about, and we get in the meeting room and the whiteboard and we start whiteboarding lots of circles and lots of lines, right? We get in there and it's death by circles and lines. We've got to make this beautiful network. We've got to make it this beautiful design that is perfect. It's celestial, it's perfect, right? What I'm here to say is you don't have to start there. You just have to do something. Make an improvement on your network every day. If you leave this room, okay, this is one of those pre-applause things. Make a difference and improve your security every day. And if that means just putting a little bit of effort into Control 2 today, or if that means just a little effort, and maybe you can skip down. I mean, maybe data protection, number 13, when it means doing backups. Maybe that's really important for your data. Put a little effort into that. Make sure that's done well. Wireless access controls. Some of you have large wireless deployments. Make sure that's done well. Put the effort into there, but improve security every day. Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you the link to the Center for Internet Security Critical Controls on the webpage here. I'll leave it up there for just a minute or so, or you can Google it. It's really easy. Just critical security controls if you want to do that. And this is my recommendation. If you have nothing, start here. If you have something and it's not effective, start here. If you have something and it's effective, don't mess with it. Just go with it, roll with it. Okay, because there is no bad security framework. There's no bad security methodology. It's all going to work, it's all going to be effective. It's just how much effort and how many different pulls there are to make it work. And if you've got the resources, you know what, something like NIST SP800 is great. But if you don't, and you feel like you're struggling with security resources and things, this is an incredible place to start. The last thing I've got is, this is the talk description that I put up for this talk. This presentation will focus on improving organizational security by using a security methodology and framework. Multiple frameworks will be discussed. We will focus primarily on the Center for Internet Security Controls methodology, and we will discuss how to begin implementing a framework, how to start making progress, and methods for evaluating and measuring security performance. We haven't really talked about that. Let me just segue into that because there's not a slide for that. Again, 3 a.m., it was time to not make more slides. But with a security framework, it's really easy to go back and start measuring how effective things are when there's a framework to say, okay, for control number 1, there's these 12 things. Let's just get the check mark out, or the marker out. Okay, is that part done? Yep. Okay, we've got an inventory. We know what's out there. Check. Okay, do we know, or are we controlling what things get on the network? Yes or no? Check. And it's really easy. I mean, we're talking about simplistic stuff here, but it's easy to start seeing improvement. It's easy to start coming up with a plan when it's all laid out there for you. What I'm saying is when you go to their website, again, I'm not trying to just sell you on this framework, but you go to their website, it's just really easy to see all of the things that you should be doing and then just start attacking them. Okay, so a little bit of measurement. Okay, and finally, we will open it up to discussion and answer your questions, discuss pitfalls, and help you navigate the security seas. So with that, my presentation is over, but I welcome you to ask questions. Does anybody have questions, problems, concerns? Go ahead. Okay, it's a good question. Let me repeat it for the stream and everything else. So when you've got a client application and you've got developers that are building, I'm kind of paraphrasing now, how do you take away administrative privileges from those people when they need that in all actuality to do their job? And the answer is, there are, well, I can't be like this oracle up here and give you the answer, but security from Troy, I would say there are ways to limit access. There are ways to be, to make them or allow them to have the access that they need, but not be flagrant with it. To where they don't need admin access to everything, but they might need admin access to do certain functions. And so enable them to do that, but make it separate. Make it a separate function. Like, let me stop here and just say, how many people, for your administrative privileges, have a separate account from your normal user when you're logging in as a domain admin? Okay? How many do not? How many is like, what, you do that? Right? Okay, well, good. At least there's not a ton of you that are like, what? Because here's the thing. If you make it something conscious that, hey, I've got to go in and have admin access to do X, Y, and Z, if you make them have to change to a different user, go in and do something, and then by the very nature of knowing that I'm logged in as admin, that I log back out and then I log in with my regular user, that's probably one of the better ways to do that. Give them the access that they need, but make it a separate process. Make it something that in the back of their minds they're saying, I am now logging in as admin. And let them do their things. And then make it really painful to do anything else as the administrator account so that they get pushed back out to their user land. Does that answer your question or help, I hope? Any other questions, comments, please? You're jumping up and down, is what you're saying. Okay, no, it's a great question. Let me just repeat what I heard. Excuse me. So you're trying to implement the CIS controls, and you're going through and you're just all over the place. You're implementing 13, and then you're implementing 5 or whatever, and they're not really ever getting to the end of that row, right? You're just like, okay, we're going to push a little piece here, push a little piece there, right? And then how do you focus it, and how do you make it effective? Okay, it is a great question. And so again, the security oracle up here is going to dispense wisdom. And it's only worth whatever it's worth, because I don't claim to be an expert. But my response is, there's nothing wrong with that. Because what I was just telling you is, jump from one to the other and make a difference every single day. As long as you're improving what you're doing, it's not that big of a deal. But if you need focus because you're just totally out of focus on it, then what I would recommend is focus down to 5. And maybe they're not the top 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but focus on 5 and say, these are the 5 priorities for security. And so get your own security oracle group together and hold a constitutional convention or whatever, meeting type that you want to have, and agree on what are the 5 controls that we think are the most important, and just focus on those for a while. And then I think that the other things will still kind of ping you. It's like 13 needs help again. Yep, we got to go do 13 again, and those kinds of things. But if you just focus on a few at a time, you'll make more headway. But here's the other thing: you don't have to finish a control before you move on. I guess that might be the nugget of wisdom. Don't feel like you have to finish it before you can feel accomplished. Like, just do a little bit every day. Just improve just a little bit. Go ahead. Does that answer your question? Does that help? Great. Yeah. Absolutely. Did everybody hear that, or do you need me to repeat it? Okay, I'll repeat it. So ultimately what he's saying is that it's really easy to implement these small little things on the networks that are already in line with security, the ones that you control and have access to. But it's a whole lot more difficult to implement them on the networks that you don't have control over, right? That's kind of where I'm getting to. And so that's actually a great point. As long as you have control over it, it makes it really easy. And I don't know if it's just more of just a statement to say, work on the ones you can control, and then work on bringing the others into that control a little bit at a time. Then once you have the whole flock together, as it were, it makes it a little bit easier. But yes, but you actually hit on something else that I want to or you sparked something in my brain that I want to say, and my parting thought is that as you go through, how many of you guys feel like you're just beating your head up against a wall when it comes to security? You don't know even what to do today. I mean, there's always the have to do things. Okay, I got to do the vulnerability scan. I got to kick it off. I got to go ask that guy for the 4th time to patch that piece of software. Those kinds of things. We've all been there. But if you're ever in a position to where you're like, man, I don't even know what I'm going to do today, pick a control and work on it. Okay, you'll be amazed. If you just dig into just a little bit of what's inside of each one of those controls, there's a whole list of cool things to work on, and they're actually fun. I can stand up here and say, security can be fun. It most of the time is. It's sexy and it's glamorous when you're watching it on TV, but then when you get in there and you're the one having to do vulnerability scanning and remediation and compliance, it sucks. But there are fun things about it. And so just switch your point of view. Focus on the things you have to, of course. I'm not saying, hey, just ignore the vulnerability scans and go work on 20 or control 20 for a while, because pen testing is fun. But at the same time, right? There's plenty to do. Don't lose focus. Don't lose passion. If you're not passionate about it, you're in the wrong business. Last question, if anybody has it, and then I've got to wrap up. Hearing none, thank you very much.